Welcome to the Practical NLP podcast with me, Andy Smith. Catch up on previous episodes at nlppod.com. In the next few podcasts, we're opening up a whole new area of NLP, one that's normally considered advanced but is actually quite easy: Metaprograms. Metaprograms are one of the sets of filters we use to create our map of the world. They run in the background, so we're not consciously aware of them usually. They drive what we pay attention to, what we respond to, what motivates us, how we interact with the people around us, and the kind of language that will influence us. As the name implies, metaprograms are at a different logical level to our other mental programs, such as strategies. They influence the type of information fed into our strategies, the goals we set for ourselves, the way we make decisions, and the motivation behind our strategies. When you understand metaprograms, you'll be able to see very quickly, from a minute or two's conversation with a person, what motivates that person and how to communicate with them in a way that makes it easy for them to understand and act on your suggestions. Let's consider some of the history of metaprograms. The term metaprogramming first appeared in John C. Lilly's book Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Computer, 1968. Lilly presented the human nervous system as a biological computer, running programs, either hardwired or learned. Metaprogramming, as Lilly describes it, is changing the central control system so that we can learn more quickly and select more useful programs. Richard Bandler introduced the idea of metaprograms to NLP in the late 70s as a way that people maintained coherence in their cognitive patterns. Leslie Cameron Bandler and others investigated further, using the meta model to identify a list of metaprogram patterns for use in therapy, which eventually grew to around 60. One of her students, Roger Bailey, simplified the model into 14 patterns for use in a business context, the lab profile, language and behavior patterns, as set out in Shelley Rose Charvet's excellent book, Words That Change Minds. Tad James and Wyatt Woodsmall's book, Timeline Therapy and the Basis of Personality, presents a very similar simplified set of patterns and links them to Jungian personality characteristics as used in the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Let's look at what metaprograms are not, although you'll sometimes find people using them as if they are. They're not a way of putting people into boxes at the identity level. They may be influenced by context and the person's emotional state. They're not either one thing or the other. Instead, each metaprogram is like a spectrum, and most people will be somewhere between the extreme ends. And they're not absolute. Metaprograms are context dependent. For example, people tend to be more detail-focused about subjects that interest them. Before we get into the details of the metaprograms themselves, let's stick with the big picture for a moment while I give you 6 reasons you need to know about metaprograms. Achieving rapport. Metaprograms are another thing you can match to help people feel at ease with you. Self-awareness. If you are aware of your own metaprogram preferences, you'll have a better idea about activities and career paths that allow you to play to your strengths. Recruitment. Every job has an ideal metaprogram profile. If you recruit people to match that profile, they'll perform better in that role. You can even write job ads in a way that will attract the people you want and put off the people that won't be suited to the job. Influencing. You can use language that suits people's metaprograms to influence them and communicate with them in the way that's easiest for them to understand. Managing change. Describing changes in a way that's compatible with people's metaprogram profiles will make it easier for them to accept and feel enthusiastic about changes, and will avoid triggering knee-jerk resistance. And of course, sales. You can help people to reach a buying decision by presenting them with information in the style and sequence that works for their metaprogram filters. Let's look at how you can detect people's metaprograms. Depending on the specific metaprogram, you can detect them from the words that people use, the structure of their language patterns and the way they talk, maybe also the way they behave, and in some cases their history, for example, how frequently they've changed jobs. Traditionally, metaprograms have been taught at master practitioner level. I believe this is to do with the fact that they were discovered later than the classic NLP components like submodalities and anchoring, rather than saying anything about their complexity or level of difficulty. In fact, metaprograms are easy to understand, recognize, and use, and too useful to leave out of a business-oriented NLP podcast. We'll cover 6 of the most useful metaprograms for business, with tips on how to identify them, job roles that different patterns may suit, and advice on how to influence and manage them. You can also go back to the Convincer channel and Convincer mode in the podcast episodes when we were talking about buying strategies a few episodes back. These are also classed as metaprograms, but it was more useful to cover them under buying strategies since that's their main use. As far as the names of the patterns go, I'm generally going to identify them by the names of each end of the spectrum that they cover, rather than the fancier names that NLP books and courses normally use. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that it's always nice if the name offers some kind of clue as to what they are, and the other is that I find this is how most NLP practitioners refer to the metaprograms in practice, probably because it helps them remember what each one does. I'll also mention the more official names of each pattern though. Let's start with towards or away from, also known as the direction filter or motivation direction. Are you motivated towards goals, targets, and what you desire, or away from problems and difficulties? Extreme towards people will be gung-ho and will overlook potential problems that can trip them up. Think Second Iraq War or stock market and housing bubbles. People who are very away from will be perceived as fault-finding and overly negative or cynical by their colleagues, and they'll lack direction unless they're given a problem to solve or a crisis to fix. They will also run out of motivation the further away they get from what they wanted to avoid, so they might never lose that last 8 pounds, or they might get close to their professed goals, but then let them slide so they never actually get there. Like all metaprograms, this one is context dependent, although you may find that someone is strongly towards or strongly away from in almost all contexts that you ask about. So to identify the towards away from pattern, to do this formally, you could ask, what do you want in a job, or a car, or a relationship, or a house? This will start to give you the person's values, what motivates them. For each value, you can ask, why is that important to you? The answers will either be towards what they want, away from what they don't want, or a mixture. Some values may be more towards or away from than others. Keep asking, why is that important to you? At least 3 times. The initial answer is likely to be coloured by the prevailing culture. For example, in the US, I think you're more likely to get a towards answer first than in the UK. So you need to go a bit deeper to find the person's real pattern. To identify this pattern conversationally and informally, towards people will be talking about what they want, what they'd like to see, what they can get, what they can achieve, and the benefits they can get. Their body language will be nodding, gestures indicating the vision that they're moving towards, and inclusive gestures. A person who's away from in a given context will talk about what to avoid. They'll say, yes, but. They'll talk about problems, including solving problems, pitfalls, avoiding things, removing obstacles. Hang on a minute, they might say. Comparative deletions, modal operators of impossibility, and referring to target dates as deadlines. Their body language will include dismissive or warding off gestures and shaking their head, maybe with little expressions of disgust if they feel really strongly about the matter. Look out for concealed away froms in people's language patterns, where the away from motivation is not explicitly mentioned, but it's there in the person's internal representations. For example, comparative deletions. Why is it important to have money? Well, it's better to have money. Better than what? Better than not having any, of course, which is what they want to avoid. Or modal operators of necessity. For example, you've got to have money, haven't you? Well, what happens if you don't? Or, I should report this, which suggests they don't want to report it, but they're also concerned about consequences if they don't. Let's look at the kind of jobs where one pattern or the other is useful. A towards pattern is useful in visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, ideas people. It's often found in change agents, coaches, and NLP practitioners and other people interested in personal development. An away from pattern is useful in health and safety officers, process control, proofreading, and maintenance engineers. It's often found in medicine, pharmacy, solicitors, accountants, and the civil service and bureaucrats of all kinds. To influence someone with a towards pattern, use language like, this is what we can achieve, this is what it'll get you, and talk about benefits, results, achievement, winning, advantages, what you can have. Just think about it. If you're an extreme towards person, you may want to look at the massive benefits of doing an occasional mind sweep to make sure the route to your goals stays clear of potential problems. To influence the away from person, talk about solving the problem, fixing it, avoiding difficulties, sorting things out, eliminating problems. This is what will happen unless we take this action. These will be the consequences if we don't do it. If there are no immediate problems to motivate the away from person, ask them to look into the future to see the problems that will occur if they don't take action now. Sales professionals will recognize that this is an essential part of Neil Rackham's spin selling model. Advertisements for cleaning products often use a lot of away from imagery. There's much more about this metaprogram and several others in Shelley Rose Charvet's very readable book, Words That Change Minds. There's a link to find it in the show notes at nlppod.com. That's it for this week's podcast. Remember, you can see the show notes for this episode at nlppod.com, and you can download back episodes you may have missed from the online store at webstore.nlppod.com. See you next time.